Hey, Campfire crew, let's get it on. Stalked by a Nightmare Tinder Date by Yellow Possum. This happened in college. At the time I was 18 and a sophomore. I had just recently gotten out of a 6-year relationship and was starting to get into the dating scene. I downloaded Tinder and got to swiping. Some background. I didn't want to talk to someone that went to my university because thinking about running into someone I was talking to out in the wild really made me anxious. I ended up matching with this guy. We'll call him Marco. Marco was 20 and a junior at the neighboring university, about 15 minutes up the road. He had one selfie and 2 other pictures he had were group photos, and they seemed older, but I didn't think much of it. We started chatting and very quickly he asked for my phone number. I said it was a little too early for that, but he kept insisting, and eventually I gave in. After about 2 days of talking, he started to ask for pictures, so I would send selfies. He then asked for more provocative pictures, and I kept shutting him down, telling him that I wasn't interested in that, and I just wanted to see where things went. Marco said how he couldn't wait to meet me so he could kiss me, and every time he would say that, I just changed the subject. We planned a date after a week of talking. He said that he knew a good Indian restaurant over by his school, and then we could walk in the downtown area after. I agreed as it would be in a public place. The day came for the date. I started to get a weird feeling. I told my roommate what we had planned, and she said she would keep her phone on if I needed her. A few hours before the date, I got cold feet and told him my car wouldn't start and asked to reschedule. He offered to pick me up. I kept telling him no and that we should just reschedule. But he kept insisting and started to make me feel guilty. He said how he was looking forward to it for the past few days, and I was hurting his feelings, and that he would be more than willing to get me, but I wasn't giving him the chance. Well, I caved, and it was the worst decision ever. Despite the feelings I was having, I told him the information to get to the lot outside my dorm. Right when I got into the car, I realized that this was probably going to be a horrible date. Right away, he tried to hold my hand and asked to give me a kiss. I turned him down, and he started to drive off. On the way to our destination, he dropped that we were no longer going to the restaurant, that we were going to his apartment instead, and he was going to cook me dinner. At that point, my heart sank, and I started to have a small panic attack. I texted my roommate letting her know, and she was worried and said that she would come and get me if I needed it. Again, not listening to my gut, I told her that everything was fine, and we got to his place. When I say his apartment was disgusting, I mean it was covered in trash, dirty clothes, and dishes. He said that we had to go into his room because his roommate was home and he didn't like it when he had company. His bedroom was even worse than the common area. There was only a single path to the bed and to the bathroom. It was so dirty. We sat on his bed and he turned on a movie. I can't remember the movie. All I remember is the stench of the room and him starting to make advances on me. Marco started rubbing my back and shoulders. I kept scooting away, trying to put some distance between us, but it didn't work. After a few minutes, he started to force himself on me. He started to kiss me hard and held my head so I couldn't move it. I don't know how, but he eventually was on top of me and forced his entire body weight on me, and I couldn't move an inch. I was paralyzed by fear. He didn't get much further than that, because as soon as he was on me, he just as quickly came off and ran to the restroom, and he was throwing up. I have never been so thankful for vomit. I don't know why he got sick. When he came out, he apologized for getting sick and that it happens all the time, and he said he needed to take me home. Trembling, I just got up, straightened myself, and followed him out. I still don't know if he was going to try anything else, and I didn't want to aggravate him or say anything wrong, so I tried to act like nothing was wrong to get home safely, and that's what happened. He pulled up to my building and told me that he wanted to make it up to me, and I just nodded and said goodnight and then got out of the car. Once inside, I blocked him, reported him on Tinder, and deleted the app. I also took extra measures to block him on any social media I could. I didn't tell anyone at first what happened. I was embarrassed because I put myself in that position. Then I started getting calls from random numbers, and when I answered, there wouldn't be anyone on the other line. Each time I would block the number, and then another one would be calling. It got to the point my phone was ringing constantly, and after the phone calls were random Facebook and Instagram messages from different accounts. They would say things like, "Why are you ignoring me? Why aren't you talking to me?" And then they started getting more aggressive and threatening. My roommate started getting messages, and I had to tell her everything. She told me I needed to report him, or at least tell my parents. I didn't do either because I was scared. That is, until I started receiving random pictures of myself. I would be walking on campus, in the dining hall, in class. Then I got one of me in my dorm room. It was taken through my window, which was on the second floor. However, the main street was a hill that was the same level as my window, and that is what my room faced. My bed was in front of that window. I told my roommate, and she made me tell our RA. The RA was very concerned and ended up calling the campus police. I made a report with them, and the messages continued, and so did the photos, until one day, about a week later, Marco approached me on campus. He grabbed me by the arm and tried to take me to his car. I started to yell, and luckily there was campus police nearby. He was arrested and was banned from my campus, and I didn't hear from him again. This was in 2014, so some of my memories aren't as vivid, and I've tried to block this part of my past out. Not many people know that this happened to me, and to this day my family doesn't know. The only people that know are my college roommate, the RA, the campus police, my therapist, and as of the other night, my fiancé. I want to spread the awareness of the dangers of online dating. Always trust your gut. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. Not all online dating has consequences, though. I met my now fiancé a few years later on Facebook dating. But your gut is usually right, and sometimes it's crucial to listen to it. With that being said, Marco, let's not meet again. Knock 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 by Sweet 170. I was about 13 when this happened. My parents were gone for a weekend for a trip together and left me and my two siblings home alone. Our grandma was a minute down the road if we needed her, and my sister was 18 at the time, so it wasn't a big deal for a night or two. I was in the spare bedroom, which had a couch, TV, and an Xbox 360, but I was really into playing or using it to watch Netflix. It was the summer of 2015, by the way. I was watching some random show. Knowing me, it was probably The Vampire Diaries at the time, and it was maybe 9 or 10 at night. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. On the window. I ignored it at first, just thinking it was a little weird, and just kept scrolling through memes on my iPod and watching TV. When it happened again. Which is about when I started freaking out. The windows in the room had curtains over them, so I didn't see who it was. But I knew I needed to get the fuck out of there. I went to get my older sister and told her what was happening, and as I moved through the house, the knocking on our windows followed me. Knock, knock, knock. She and my brother heard the knocking on the glass, too, and started freaking out with me. My sister had me and my brother hide in the corner of our kitchen that didn't have any windows looking in, and made sure our front door was locked. We called our parents, and then our grandma. They had us call our next-door neighbor to take a quick look around. He was a Vietnam vet in his 60s at the time, and we knew he had guns and training if needed. He didn't find anything. We were all unsettled the rest of the night, but knew our parents were coming home the next day. Fortunately, everything was okay, and it never happened again. To this day, about a decade later, it still bothers me not knowing who it was. I have 3 theories which are progressively less probable. Someone who escaped from an academy that's about 2 miles down the road from our house, which was for juvenile reform kids that got into legal trouble. Or the man that was sexually abusing me through that summer and winter, but I don't think he'd be bold enough to get that close to my house, not knowing who was home. That's a whole other story. And the final option was my biological father, who was barely in the picture at the time. Whoever it was, let's not meet. Saved by a Scary Stranger. Submitted by Sean Wiley. Growing up, I was a shy kid. I turned into a shy adult. It's not that I didn't have any friends or anything, but even around them, I was known as the quiet one. It's just who I am, I guess. When I went to college, I started to open up a little more as I didn't want to miss any of the experiences school had to offer. I got involved in some clubs, played co-ed intramural sports, and made some really great friends right away. They all seemed to have the hang of the whole party scene down. And after the first couple of weeks of watching movies in my room by myself, they dragged me out to house parties and then to the town bars. I was an art major, and I was good at chalking IDs. This was in 1993 or thereabouts, so my talents also earned me a lot of friends that way. Guys and girls would pay me to chalk their IDs or buy me drinks or pay the $3 for parties. Whatever worked for them. For the first time in my life, I had a taste of what people would consider being cool, and I even got to know some of the bouncers and bartenders who knew I was underage. My ID was really good, so they didn't care so much, especially at one place where I drew weekly ads for. What specials were going on, if they were having a live band, that sort of thing. Mostly for the school newspaper. Anyway, one night a group of us went to a frat party, and to this day I have no idea what I did. But I apparently pissed off some high-ranking guy in the frat. I'm pretty sure someone broke something and then blamed it on me, the hapless dude in the crowd. And beer-fueled brains and muscles took over. I was literally thrown out of the party, out the back door. I landed in a heap, and in my drunkenness, I just laid there for a while as the world spun around me. Finally realizing that I was alone and none of my friends had seen what happened to me, I got up and started to walk home, humiliated. Being hammered didn't help things, as I got more and more upset and angry. Stumbling around, I realized I didn't know where I was. My directional skills sucked, and they still do suck. I praised GPS when it came out. So I started walking back to the dorms, in exactly the wrong direction. It didn't faze me that I didn't recognize any houses or landmarks. I just kept walking, thinking I would somehow get back to campus. It was only when I got to the outskirts of the town that I realized I'd fucked up. There weren't any houses anymore, and I sort of came out of my drunken stupor. Just a little. I stopped, turned around, and then got the idea to cut through a neighborhood diagonally from where I thought I had come from. Bad idea. As I walked along, now even angrier at myself for not sticking up for myself at the party, I was also lost. I came up on a little playground in between some houses, and shit went from bad to worse. Hanging out on the jungle gym were a bunch of guys, close to my age, but I kind of figured out they were actually seniors at the local high school. As I walked by them, I saw them getting down from the jungle gym one by one. There were 5 of them. One called out, "Hey, faggot, come here." But I kept on walking. The last thing I needed was a fight with townies. I picked up my pace, but when I looked back, I saw that they were following me. When I heard their footsteps running, I also took off running, not knowing where I was going. I tried to cut across a lawn at an intersection, but slipped on the wet grass, and before I knew it, the guys were right on me. Can't tell you how many times I was punched and kicked, but I felt my arms getting yanked up and I heard a voice say, "This will teach faggots to stay out of our neighborhood," and I felt a sting in my side. I remember falling to my knees and all of them laughing, calling me all these names, when I heard a pounding coming nearer. Suddenly, everything got quieter, and a deep voice said, "What are you little assholes up to?" I heard a voice say back meekly, "Hey, Clint, nothing. This guy was starting shit with us." The deep voice said back, "Yeah? I don't think so." And then I heard a bunch of slapping sounds, like someone hitting raw meat. All of them started yelling, and when I looked, 3 of the guys were running down the street, and 2 of the others were lying on the ground groaning. Then I heard a snap and a scream. And then another one. And then everything faded into just groaning. The deep voice said, "You okay?" "Wait. Damn, son, you're bleeding like a stuck pig." A hand grabbed my arm and yanked me up to my feet. The guy, I guess Clint, was standing in between me and a streetlight. But this guy was so massive I could only see the light around him. I never got a look at his face. "Follow me," he said, and led me a couple of blocks to a police substation where there was EMS. "Go over there, they'll help you out. And stop wandering around places you don't belong, college boy." He laughed and then said, "Don't worry, you'll be okay. Just go." "What about those other guys?" I asked. I was speaking over my shoulder, as he never got in front of me. "Them? Fuck 'em. Their arms will heal." The dude had broken their arms. I stumbled towards the door of the place, and when I went in, two guys jumped up and, after one looked at me, started going to work to stop the bleeding. They started firing all kinds of questions at me, like, "Who did this? Where were you? Do you live on campus?" The next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance, and I ended up in the hospital, where a really nice doctor gave me 14 stitches in my side. He took all my information and called the police, who the EMS guys had already notified of me. They came in and asked me the same questions, and I told them everything except where the party had taken place. I was being honest, but I'm not a rat. I knew that address, but I played dumb. I also didn't say a word about the guy who helped me, but I did hear people talking about 2 high school kids that arrived at the hospital, each with a broken arm. I found out later that they never talked about the guy either. They released me and gave me a ride to the dorms, and that was it. I laid low for a couple of weeks, my friends all apologizing for losing me during the night. I had 2 black eyes to go along with my stab wound, so I was a pretty awful sight to see. I couldn't shake the fear of that night. But eventually, I got over it. Word got around, and a bunch of my friends wanted to get a posse of sorts together to go find the guys that did this to me and kick their ass. A couple of weeks later, everyone convinced me to go out and took me to my favorite bar, and the bartender asked me where I'd been and what happened to my face. I told him the story, and he said, "Wait, a guy named Clint helped you?" I said, "Yeah." And he looked at another bartender and said, "Clint helped this kid out." The other guy whistled and said, "Damn, kid, never heard that happening before." They went on to tell me that Clint was this local guy who had failed out of college and was one of the worst townies ever. He went out of his way to kick the shit out of any college guy who so much as looked at him sideways. They kept going on and on about him, saying he was meaner than a snake and a total loner, and amazed that he had helped me out. And that was it. The rest of college was smooth, and I never crossed paths with Clint. That is, until my 20th reunion. I went back to campus to see my old friends, and we had a great time. The bar I so loved was still there, but it had changed hands a number of times, and we just all went for the nostalgia. As we were getting drinks, I noticed a guy sitting at the end of the bar not talking to anyone. And for some reason, he looked familiar. I went over to him and said, "Excuse me, is your name Clint?" He didn't answer. He just slowly got off his stool and stood up. The guy was mammoth, and I don't mean fat. Honestly, he looked like the tough guy from that movie 3 O'Clock High. "Who are you?" he said. And for a minute I was quiet. And then I told him who I thought he was, and what he had done for me. He looked deep into my eyes, and a thin smile came over his face. "Still not staying out of neighborhoods you don't belong, huh?" I quickly ordered 2 shots and 2 beers, and without a word, he took a shot and a beer and downed them. I did too. "Stay out of trouble tonight, college boy. I'm retired." And with that, he walked out of the bar. I didn't even get to thank him. So yeah, it was a scary-ass night for me way back when, but I'm grateful a total stranger was there to lend a hand. A stranger who still looked like he could clear a room all on his own. As thankful as I was, there was still a presence of danger around that guy. Like if I had caught him at a bad time, I'd be going back to the hospital. I'm glad I caught him on a good night. Scary motherfucker, for sure. The Man Who Waited for Me by Binch Lauren. I'm a female, 23 years old, and I stayed with my friend for a couple of weeks in the town I grew up in. My friend is also a female and 23. She worked at a restaurant, and without giving away too many details about the location, it was a plaza with a river nearby, a movie theater, restaurants, and boutiques. To get there, we entered through the parking garage, which had 3 stories, both elevators and stairs, and this is important. She had a 6-hour shift, so I decided to do some shopping, listen to music, and walk around before eating at the restaurant my friend worked at. I was sitting at the bar on the corner alone, just listening to music. A bigger man approached me. He had a security guard beanie on that was incredibly dirty and tattered up. He was muttering, and his eyes were barely open. What I got from his muttering was, "Are you... I like your... Is anybody sitting?" But keep in mind, it was incredibly muttered. I'm just guessing what he was trying to say. And all of this was said while he was switching back and forth between looking into my eyes and staring at my chest. I told him multiple times I couldn't understand what he said. After a bit of back and forth, I put my headphones back around my neck and he left me alone. I told my friend about what happened immediately, and I tried to shake it off, hoping it was just an isolated incident. If this is where the story ended, I wouldn't be writing this, unfortunately. About an hour or so later, I saw someone approach the bar to my left out of the corner of my eye, and I felt their eyes on me. I didn't look, but somehow I knew it was him. My heart started beating really fast, and I texted my friend and told her I felt really sketched out. I wanted to believe that I was misreading things and was just letting anxiety get the best of me, but I couldn't shake the feeling. 30 minutes or so later, she got off work. As we walked towards the parking garage stairs to get to our car, I saw the guy sitting on a bench, waiting for me. The benches aren't super close to the elevators. They're closer to the restaurant, if anything. The second I spotted him, my blood ran cold. He saw us and started walking towards the stairs to the parking garage and started running towards us. I was face to face with him by the time we got to the top of the stairs. We booked it back to the restaurant and used the employee elevator to get to her car, and an employee escorted us to her car as well. The employee told us there are a lot of cases of homeless people who walk around the restaurants, so I presume he was just homeless and walking in and out of the restaurants until he saw me. I'm incredibly thankful I trusted my gut, and that I saw him out on the street. I don't know what would have happened to us if I hadn't seen him first, but I don't want to find out. To that strange man, let's not meet. Neighborhood Stalker Watched Me Sleep by Few Novel. In pre-COVID 2020, I, a 25-year-old female, was 21, and I moved into an apartment in Louisville, Kentucky. The neighborhood I lived in was near downtown, and a good mix of college students, houseless people, sketchy people, and pockets of rich people. I'd lived in that neighborhood for years because I didn't have a car, and it was pretty central to everything, so I could walk or take the bus. My partner at the time found the apartment, and we moved in right away without even seeing it because we were living in a friend's living room before that. If I had seen the apartment, I probably would have straight up refused to live there because of the entrance, situated on the corner of a busy street and an alley. There was a front entrance for most of the units in the building that were facing a busy street, but the back 3 units, mine being on the first floor, was accessible only by a gate a couple of yards into the alley. My partner and I broke up shortly after moving in, so I was walking to work, an hour and 10 minutes one way, one afternoon, and either walking or taking the bus at night. I've lived in a lot worse neighborhoods throughout my childhood and was a bit of a street rat as a high schooler, so I learned how to be safe walking around at night. I always carried a weapon and confronted people following me or hitting on me. I knew all the tips and tricks, but I was still pretty fucking dumb. Around this time I was drinking a lot, stumbling home from the bar or my friends' houses to my alleyway apartment. Sometimes I would walk around with my girlfriend at the time until 6 or 7 in the morning, breaking into abandoned buildings and lots. There were a lot of opportunities for me to be watched, and a lot of times when I was vulnerable to stalking. Being in the alley, I could see a lot of weird shit going on at all hours of the night. And one of the first nights I was there on my own, I was awake when a dude tried the back gate. I just banged on the window and it scared him away. Another time I saw someone steal a TV from a neighboring building, and I once saw one of my neighbor's cars get broken into, just to name a few things in my neighborhood. One night, I was biking home from a party with my headphones in. I felt a lot safer on my bike, but still paid attention to my surroundings. When I turned down the alley, I looked to make sure no one sketchy was hanging around. In the time it took for me to get my keys from my belt loop and take my headphones out, there was a guy standing maybe 2 feet in front of me. He just popped out of nowhere, almost like he was hiding until he saw me. I didn't know what to do. He didn't seem super menacing or anything. We were just both silent, and I waited until I saw him walk away before I opened the gate. I always kept my doors locked, and most of my windows, with the exception of my living room window during the warm months where I would let my cats outside, and I would sometimes forget to lock the window. But a few times, either me or my girlfriend had been drunk and had to break into the apartment, jumping the fence and hoping we had left a window unlocked. After my girlfriend and I had a bad breakup, I made sure to keep everything locked, just in case. One night I had closed the bar with my friends and kept drinking at a friend's house nearby into the early hours of the morning. I stumbled home and fed my cats before passing out in my bed. I usually don't remember my dreams when I drink heavily, but this dream was vivid and strange. It felt like I had sleep paralysis. I dreamt that someone was standing over my bed, and that I couldn't move. He was standing over me and touching something, and whether it was me, himself, or my bed was unclear. I just remember feeling frozen and scared. The next morning I woke up hungover, thinking I had just had another bad dream, and I saw that my friend Kayla, who's another 26-year-old female, who lived across the street, texted me wondering if I would take a walk with her. I immediately got up and went into my spare room to find some clean clothes and found the window wide open. For reference, every window in the apartment was facing my porch behind the gate. At first, I was just afraid one of my cats had somehow opened the window and got out. But I saw all of my cats were in the house and remembered that the guest bedroom door was always closed. I racked my brain. I was rarely in the spare bedroom. It was just overflowing from my closet and a general catch-all space. I was scared to touch the window at first, but I noticed there were finger marks on it, like someone had slid the window from the glass itself. Then I saw the lock. The lock was loose. The locking mechanism itself no longer worked. I got really afraid. When I met with Kayla, I told her. We laughed it off at first, but it just stuck with me and seemed weird. But I refused to go with my gut and just believed the window must have been broken. And maybe I left the handprints from a separate time. I ended up texting my then ex-girlfriend to confront her. I figured she had broken in my window like she had before when we were together, but she seemed genuinely confused and scared for me. I ended up nailing all my windows shut, installing a door alarm and calling the cops, although they offered no solutions. Talking to the cops was a difficult decision. In Louisville during 2020, there was a lot of police violence. See the murder of Breonna Taylor and the protests that followed. And a lot of people in Louisville had a lot of distrust towards the PD. I requested to be moved to a different apartment in the same building, bars to be put on my windows, or be let go from my lease. But the property management company I rented from offered no solutions either. I felt really scared to stay there or even think about it. I posted on Instagram asking for help from my friends, and I ended up giving my cats to my friends to look after for a few days, and I stayed in the basement of another friend. I also got some DMs from other people, girls around my age who lived in the neighborhood, saying that they've been seeing creeps around lately. Someone said a dude followed her home. Someone said that someone was staring at them sunbathing in their backyard, and another said someone had left potatoes on their porch. And crazier, one of my male friends with long hair was followed home from a bar until the pursuers realized he was a boy. I was completely dumbfounded and in a state of shock for the first few days. As I moved my cats back into my apartment, I asked my upstairs neighbor if she had seen anything weird. She told me the night in question she had seen a small-build guy, noticeably skinny, short and dark-haired, with a gaunt face, messing with my window. She assumed it was one of my friends who was locked out and was just minding her own business. I know, right? More and more people were reaching out to me about their experiences, and I started to connect certain things. A lot of these people said their experience was with someone of the same description, and a lot of people were saying their windows were being looked into, or someone was trying to break into their apartments. Eventually, through group detective effort, I learned from an acquaintance of a friend a possible name, found from a photo on a separate Facebook profile. The picture felt right to me, matched my neighbor's description and the description from a few other people that came forward with their stories. But the more I learned, the scarier it was. I needed a roommate, but of course no one wanted to move in. I was scared to go to sleep for months. The neighborhood bar became sort of a hub for me to talk to people who had similar experiences and even write down the information about the instances of creeps in the neighborhood, and see which stories could be connected to my own. I told the bartender about what had happened, and showed him the only picture I had of the guy, and you couldn't see his face. I would learn years later that he showed up at the bar and looked through the window of the pizza place attached to it and just stared into the window at my friend who was working that night. The bouncers and bartenders chased him off and told him they'd kick his ass if they ever saw him again. I was at that bar from open to close most nights out of the week. I had periods of not working due to COVID. I stopped eating. I was doing coke because I didn't want to go to sleep, and many nights I would just stay up and smoke cigarettes, waiting for this guy to come back. And then, he did. He let me know he had been watching me for months. Every time I came home with groceries, every time I walked down the street having a loud conversation with someone, and then unknowingly walked by him on the street, he had been listening to me and watching me for months. A couple weeks later, the window was open again. This time, the spare room door was left open too. Then a few weeks later, a bag of fresh spinach, spinach, like the kind you get from the fresh produce section, was put in a flimsy little plastic bag and nestled right against the right corner of my doorstep. I went through the options. I often cook with spinach. Maybe I left it there from the last time I went grocery shopping. But I hadn't gone grocery shopping since all of this started. Then I thought maybe my upstairs neighbor dropped it as she was going up the stairs. But how would it have made its way across my porch and end up on my elevated doorstep? I asked everyone I knew if they had left it for me, and they all thought the question was weird as fuck. I left the spinach there as a message to this guy, and it began to wilt and then mold. Months passed like this. Strange things would be out of place. I'd hear more stories from other people in the neighborhood, rinse and repeat. I was getting more paranoid from the drugs, alcohol, and lack of food and sleep. This went on for months until one day Kayla told me that she saw this guy. He was standing on a stoop in the lot outside her living room window, peeking in. She was terrified, and she would go on to see him a couple of more times. A few months into this harrowing ordeal, I got a car. I met a boy, we fell in love, and he spent a lot of time at my apartment. He always noted how scary it felt there. We would look out the window at night and watch fights happen or watch shit get stolen. The street parking around my apartment was horrible, and as a new driver with a minivan, parallel parking on a busy road was a horrible option. I opted to park in the lot behind Kayla's apartment and walk across the street and down the alleyway to my place. One day I walked across the street to get to my car and saw something under my windshield, and my heart sank. Movie tickets for the 2021 Candyman movie, which I watched with my ex-girlfriend when I came out. But the two tickets, two of them untorn, looked like they were brand new. They were crisp and unwrinkled, and could not be months old. I immediately knew who had left them there. I felt it in my gut. I sent a picture of them to my new boyfriend, who assured me it was probably nothing. Years later, after we had moved into a new house in a new neighborhood together, he told me that he knew what they were too, and he was scared but didn't want to fan my flames. As time passed, I tried to forget about the incident as long as I had to sleep in that apartment, although the fear stayed. I often wondered about what kind of person he was, what he was capable of, and what he actually did to me while I was passed out, if anything. I wondered if I met him at the neighborhood bar once or talked to him on the street. I wondered if he was still slinking around my apartment. He was certainly still around. Kayla called me distraught, telling me that he was in her window again. But this time her landlord, who lived upstairs, came down with a shotgun and threatened him. And this is the part that I'm a little hazy on. But from what I understood, before the guy could run, the landlord demanded his ID and took a photo of it. The cops were called, but I'm not sure what came of that specific incident. When Kayla sent me the picture of the ID, I immediately sent it to my mom, who is a paralegal. She found his criminal record, and from what she could surmise, he was a young dude whose behavior was either triggered or exacerbated by a stressful situation involving child support payments a couple of years back. The first charge had to do with that. Then came charges of trespassing, breaking and entering, assault, sexual assault, domestic violence, and things like that. As an armchair detective, it really seemed like the guy, who was in his mid to late 20s, was possibly on drugs, was ramping up to do something really, truly violent, to really hurt someone badly. I used to imagine he was severely mentally ill and wasn't fully aware of what he was doing. But now I knew he was purposefully seeking out these acts, scaring and hurting young and vulnerable people, and traumatizing them forever. I truly believed he got off on control and imposing intense fear on people. This was almost 3 years ago. I'm 24 now, and I bought a house in a different neighborhood. Now, sober from coke, and I don't drink nearly as much, I've spent the last 3 years trying to forget about this terrifying ordeal, wishing that I'd been stronger and could have dealt with it differently, and honestly trying to fully distance myself. I am inclined to talk to the police again and tell my full story and what I know. Even if they do nothing with the information, I will at least know I did everything I could to at least impact this guy's record, if not stop him from hurting or scaring someone else. Creepy dude that watched me sleep and harassed my friends, I hope I've rid you from my life forever. Let's not meet. My Creepy Online Encounter by Kayla M. When I was single, I ventured into the world of online dating and stumbled upon a guy named William. Our initial interaction seemed harmless enough as we exchanged messages, but one day things took a bizarre turn when we exchanged numbers, and he initiated a call. During our conversation, he adopted an unsettling demeanor, referring to me as his pet and subjecting me to a weird intelligence test. Despite passing this test, his behavior grew increasingly strange. One particularly alarming proposition involved his desire for me to visit him and star in a homemade horror film, wherein he envisioned me as a belly dancer performing in scenes of questionable nature, including a chilling scenario of bathing with him in a tub of fake, or at least I hope it was fake, blood. His unsettling ideas even extended to plans to lure me into the woods to experiment with hypnosis using an emerald necklace. Feeling deeply unsettled, I made the decision to sever ties with him. As I went to his profile to block him from further contact, curiosity led me to go through his photos first. What I discovered only fueled my unease. He was a bald man adorned with tattoos, sporting eerie white contact lenses, and posing in unsettling scenarios, such as a, hopefully fake, blood-covered garage while wearing a ski mask. Without hesitation, I blocked him, hoping to leave this creepy encounter behind me. Years later, when I thought I had escaped his eerie presence, fate threw me an unexpected curveball. While I was driving home from the mall, a vehicle pulled up beside me. To my horror, it was William. His eerie grin and knowing waves sent shivers down my spine. I watched him as he sped off. The memory of our strange conversations and his eerie demeanor came flooding back over me. That night, I made sure all my doors were locked and I double-checked the windows. I can't help but wonder what could have happened if I had agreed to meet him in person. But I was grateful for my instincts that led me to block him all those years ago. From that day on, I've been more cautious about who I interact with online, realizing that not everyone is who they seem to be. The Time I Almost Died Walking Home by Unlikely Fruit. This was a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago. And for some context, I'm 16 as of now, and when this happened, I was about 14 and a half. Growing up, I lived in a bad neighborhood, in a bad area, so it wasn't safe for someone my age to be walking around alone, especially at night. For some context, this takes place after school. I had just gotten out one day, and I normally would take the bus home. But this day, I decided I wanted to hang out with some of my friends instead, so I did. My school had a park and a corner store pretty close by, so we went to the store after school, and then we went back to the park to play some basketball because one of my friends had brought a basketball with him. We played for a few hours, and before we knew it, it was dark out, like 7 or 8. But we weren't too worried because we didn't have school the next day. It was a Friday. Most of us had a ride, except for me. So I waited around until everyone had gotten picked up and gone home, and then I started walking home. My house was about 30 minutes away from the park, so it was a long walk, and about 10 or 15 minutes in, I felt uneasy. I had that feeling that I was being stared at. I was hoping I was wrong, and that it was just nerves. But I checked over my shoulder, and I noticed a tall, older man following me. I was terrified, and I didn't know what to do, so I kept walking and pretending I didn't notice him. But at some point, I heard him speed up and walk faster. Eventually, he started running towards me, and I just started bolting as fast as I possibly could. But he caught up to me and tackled me to the ground. He had a knife and tried to stab me in the face, but I put my arm in the way to defend myself. And thankfully, a guy saw it happen and chased this man away. And then the guy called 911 and checked on me. The man had gotten me pretty good in the arm and had cut everything inside of my arm. I was bleeding badly. But thankfully, the ambulance came in time to save me, and I was okay. But now, I'm really terrified to walk alone at night. I do carry a knife on me at all times, just in case. After this incident, I moved away to a different state and a safer area. To this day, I have absolutely no idea why this guy did this to me. He didn't try to rob me or kidnap me. He just attacked me. It's always kind of bothered me, not knowing why he did exactly what he did. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear on this channel or my podcast, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, leave a comment below, especially comments about the stories, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I love reading the comments. Follow me on social media, links to that are in the description below, and if you'd like to take your support a step further, there's a link to my Patreon page in the description, as well as a link to my storefront on tpublic.com. Get yourself some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.